On today's edition of Locked On LSU, we'll go behind enemy lines and see what it will take for LSU to beat Georgia on Saturday and win an SEC championship.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Special crossover Wednesday edition. Locked On Bulldogs, Locked On LSU. I am Daniel Monroe. That's Caroline Fenton. Over there from Locked On LSU. Excited to talk about the SEC championship game. Caroline, how are you?
Well, I've been better.
Yeah.
Following a crossover, an unranked team with 4 wins.
Yeah.
But
Not ideal. I expected this conversation to be a lot different. I'm going to be honest with you. I think we both did.
Absolutely expected this to be different. Fully expected LSU to go into Texas A&M, with one of the best defenses in the country, going up against one of the worst offenses in the country. I thought, okay, that's a recipe for success.
Seemed
for
like
LSU.
A good matchup.
Exactly. Yeah. Sounded like a great matchup for LSU, but obviously that's not how it turned out. So I think all of us LSU fans are asking, how in the world did that happen? Yeah. Why did that happen? Did Texas A&M all of a sudden just figure out things offensively and just completely confused LSU defensively? A lot of questions after that game, but trying to put that in the rear view and focus on the big game at hand. Obviously, at least on our side of things, the stakes aren't as high as we thought they would be going into this game, with at least, college football playoff hopes still alive. So that's not necessarily the case. So I think for LSU, it's just go in, play your heart out, see what happens, see if you can get into a better New Year's Six bowl, hope for the best against a really, really good team.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I wanted to start, from a big picture perspective. Obviously, the game for Georgia, it is the game where we're in almost the exact it's not the exact opposite position, because it's similar in the sense that no matter what happens to LSU this weekend, they're out of the college football playoff, and no matter what happens to Georgia this weekend, they're into the college football playoff. And so that's kind of my wondering from an LSU fan's perspective. We can talk about the team and the matchups and break down the rosters in a second, but just I don't know LSU fans. This is kind of the fun part about this game, is there's not a huge rivalry between Georgia and LSU. There's not a ton of crossover. Really, the only memories of Georgia and LSU have been SEC championship games, like most recently 2019, obviously, and then going back several games that I'm sure we both recall. There was that crazy high scoring Aaron Murray, Zach Mettenberger game, in Sanford Stadium, the regular season game. But other than that, there's not a ton of. So I don't interact with very many LSU fans. And so I'm wondering, from an LSU fan's perspective, has the air been let out of the balloon for this game? What's the vibe around LSU? Are we still excited to try to win the SEC, or is it all just like the season's over, forget it?
I think it's a little bit of both, because I think that there are a lot of fans that are like, dang, we controlled our own destiny to potentially be the first ever 2-loss team in the college football playoff and compete for a championship. And all of that rode on the SEC championship. All of that rode on potentially beating Georgia and Atlanta. And now that kind of that zhuzh isn't there anymore. Now that the pie in the sky possibility is no longer there. So that's a bummer of, okay, the season isn't over, but going further than a New Year's Six or the SEC championship that's no longer alive. But there's also an element there of, we're in the SEC championship in Brian Kelly's first season. LSU went 9-3 in Brian Kelly's first season. So while there's just as much disappointment that college football playoff isn't a possibility anymore, while there's just as much disappointment that you go in, you win, great. You lose, okay, fine. No harm, no foul. It's still, we're really optimistic and excited about what's to come in the future with this coaching staff, and also with these really talented young players that have emerged to be big role players for LSU so far this season. Mason Taylor, Will Campbell, the left tackle, Harold Perkins, most obviously. So there's as much disappointment as there is excitement for the future.
Yeah, and I think that's it'll be interesting to see how the players react on both sides, motivation, like what the motivation will be, but you would think that both of these programs really want to win a championship. And this
It's
is
the
now
SEC championship.
it's
You
the
want to win
SEC
it no matter what.
championship. Yeah,
Right.
and if you grow up, going to SEC schools like we did, if you grow up, in this league, in this conference, like this means everything. It means a lot to win this game. And so I don't think either team, even though their destinies are kind of already set, I don't think either team will have a problem with motivation in this game. And so it'll be interesting to see what how Georgia comes out.
Right.
If we're a little bit flat. We talked about that yesterday on the pod, and I don't think that's really something to worry about or to look out for as a Georgia fan. I think Kirby still remembers 2019, and I think that bothers him, how many points he gave up, even though everybody gave up points to LSU in 2019. Kirby is stubborn, and he doesn't like anybody scoring
He's a
against
ball
him.
coach.
He is, yeah, that's his thing. And so I think he remembers that. And then I think last year is I don't think he, obviously we won the big one, but I think it still probably bothers him quite a bit that we lost to Alabama in the SEC championship game. But I think your point is true that, if you think about LSU season from a big picture perspective, the disappointment of last week is hard to swallow right now, but you beat Florida, you beat Alabama, you all of the big rivals, you kind of check those boxes, you won the West. And so, and like you said, there's so much young talent on this LSU roster that it's got to be optimistic. Like the big picture for LSU football has to be optimistic, especially coming off of Ed Orgeron. And, I don't know what your feelings are about Ed Orgeron, but you have a coach that can coach football now. And so that's a plus. Like, that's good.
Absolutely. I mean, Ed Orgeron, I think every LSU fan feels similar to the way that I do. Is he was the head coach of LSU and he won a national championship. And he gave us the most electric and exciting year that we have experienced probably ever as LSU fans.
Sure.
He was at the helm of one of the greatest college football teams of all time.
Well, Tennessee
bitterness.
this year, Tennessee this year is the same as 2019 LSU. I don't know if you know that, Caroline, but I thought I'd bring that up.
Even when those comparisons were happening, like pre-Georgia loss, pre-South Carolina loss, I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Pump the brakes. Because at this point, they had beaten Alabama, which was week 6, week 7, somewhere around there.
Because Alabama missed a field goal.
Alabama missed a field goal. It was a great game. I mean,
it was a great game.
Really good teams.
Great game.
But I'm like, okay, let's pump the brakes here because LSU beat 7 top 25 teams. LSU went on to win the SEC championship and dominate pretty much every single team they played on their schedule, and also went on to win the national championship. So before we make comparisons, let's maybe wait until Tennessee's hoisting the college football playoff trophy. Maybe just pump the brakes there.
That's not how Tennessee fans do it. That's not the way that Tennessee fans operate.
No,
you know
that.
Not.
I know that all too well.
That's not how it.
But I mean, Tennessee's had a great season, and hats off to Josh Heupel for what he's done in his second year. But kind of looking at the Georgia side of things, like you said, LSU fans don't have a ton to look forward to for the SEC championship, but Georgia has everything to look forward to past the SEC championship. Do you think there's maybe an element there that they look past this game and look ahead to the playoff?
I mean, I think there could be, and there could be because you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-old kids. Like it's kids. We're talking about kids who are out there playing this game. Kirby is a great external motivator. We talked about that yesterday on the pod. I don't think there's anybody that I've seen who finds reasons to be up for a game outside of the team that we're playing against. He looks, externally to not about the matchup on the field, but he looks towards how can we get better as a team, or what are our goals, or those types of things. And a lot of that is coach speak, and we understand that that's just what coaches say, but really that is kind of how Kirby has run his program and tried to run his program, based on a standard and not based on the matchups on any given week. And I think too, Kirby Smart he played at Georgia. He grew up as a son of a high school football coach in Georgia. He is SEC football through and through. Like, that's his whole life. His whole life is SEC football. This game, he wouldn't say this because he knows that the money and the real prestige of college football right now is national championships. Like, that's how you dominate the landscape of college football. But to Kirby Smart, I fully believe that this game means just as much as the national championship. I think in his mind, and that's why I don't think you ever heard him say last year, well, we lost the SEC championship game, but we won the one that mattered. We won the big one. Like, he never went with that line of rhetoric because I think it bothers him still that we lost to Alabama in the SEC championship game, even though we avenged that loss in a game that mattered more. But so the look ahead is always a fear, but especially because in this college football playoff, I just don't even know if seeding matters. Like, it's hard to even know who you would want to play. So normally you would want to win so you could be the 1 seed.
Right.
But, like, is the 1 seed going to be a better matchup than the 3 seed? I don't know. Like,
Well, let's say hypothetically USC loses the Pac-12 championship. Alabama gets that 4 spot.
Or Ohio State.
Ohio State. I'd much rather play TCU.
You don't want to play either of those teams.
I don't want to play Alabama or Ohio State. I'm sure Kirby Smart, more than anybody, does not want to see Alabama in the SEC championship.
Yeah, so I think you want to win this game. I think Kirby Smart is going to have players motivated. It's a championship game. We lost it last year. I think there's all the reason for Georgia to be motivated. So let's talk about the matchups. Let's talk about who LSU is going to try to attack offensively and defensively and vice versa. First, want to let you know about Bet Online. 17.5 points, Caroline, is a lot of points for a championship game. It only moved by a point after last week. It was 16.5, and now it's 17.5 for this game. That's a lot of points that Bet Online is trying to give you for free to bet on your LSU Tigers. Are you going to bite on that? Are you going to take that?
I struggle with this because I don't want to, over-exaggerate the loss last week to Texas A&M, and I know this team is going to be motivated after that, but also every time I take a team to cover against Georgia, Georgia proves me wrong. And I think Georgia is such a difficult team to bet on because the spreads are always going to be massive just like that. So when I think surely this team will cover, Georgia proves me wrong. I am still going to take LSU to cover. I think it could be a 2-touchdown game, and then LSU still covers. So I'll take the LSU to cover the 17.5.
Georgia has messed around, Tech covered against Georgia, Kentucky,
Missouri.
Missouri. Georgia has messed around this year, and then Georgia has just run people out of the building this year. And so it is a tough spot. Bet Online is the place to go to make whatever bet you're planning on making on the SEC Championship game or any of games this weekend. Bet Online, the official sportsbook partner of Locked On Podcasts, and the only place that we trust to make all of our online wagers. Bet Online, your online sportsbook experts. All right, so let's talk about matchups. Where do you see LSU offensively trying to go to have success against this Georgia defense? Let's start on that side of the ball.
It's so difficult because every very strong offensive team that I've seen Georgia play, Georgia's able to kind of penetrate exactly what is that team's strength. For example, the Tennessee game. I mean, I didn't think that anybody was going to be able to slow down Tennessee's offense. And then you turn around and you watch Georgia almost completely shut down that offense and make Hendon Hooker look like a quarterback that hasn't thrown for 300-400 yards a game. So I think that the key here for LSU is the key that has been all season long, and that's running the football. Whether that's running the football with Jaden Daniels, if he's 100% healthy, he's a little bit banged up after the Texas A&M game, has an ankle issue. But it's going to be, the trio of running backs of Josh Williams, of John Emery, of Noah Kane, and then you add in Jaden Daniels' runability in there. That really is the bread and butter of this offense. Once the run gets going, then you start to see the passing game develop. It's going to be incredibly difficult. But I've seen, this Georgia front seven maybe isn't the Georgia front seven of last year, but the Georgia defensive backs are just absolutely lights out. I mean, I look at Keely Ringo and what he was able to do against one of the best wide receivers in college football in Cedric Tillman, and I was so impressed. So if LSU can get the run game going and maybe open up the passing game, that's the key to success for LSU here. It's just going to be incredibly difficult against this Georgia D.
Yeah, the running backs are healthy at LSU. Like, what's the situation there?
So it was more so a kind of a running back by committee. Armani Goodwin was really the one leading that charge. He was the big play guy. He took care of the football, and it was announced during the UAB game that he'll be out for the season. So they will be one running back short without Armani Goodwin, without their kind of big play guy. Noah Kane is more so your more effective, efficient back. Like he'll pick up 3-4 yard gain here and there. So he's not your big, 40, 50 yard pop off for a massive run kind of guy. But he's more of, he gets down in the trenches and picks up the yards where you need him.
Mm-hmm.
John Emery is your big play guy, but he also has a tendency to fumble the football. He had 2 fumbles against UAB. And then you also have Josh Williams, who has emerged as a back that I really didn't pay attention to preseason, that has emerged as probably the go-to guy now that Armani Goodwin is out. So you got the 3 trio of running backs that all have kind of a specific skill set.
Yeah, it's a fascinating matchup because LSU is just a weird team offensively to me from a distance, because they have maybe the best wide receivers in the SEC. And, you just said, I don't think incorrectly, that the whole offense is predicated on running the football first to try to open up the passing game. But when you have a guy like Booty on the outside and like you just got elite playmakers, and I don't think it's necessarily an issue of like Jaden Daniels can't get him the ball, but the team seems to be Jaden Daniels, I think, to win this game is going to have to throw it first and try to run second. Because I think that will be the thing, like you said, that Kirby Smart and this defensive staff says we're going to try to take that away. And we're going to try to use our inside linebackers, Jamon Dumas-Johnson and Smile Mondin, who have incredible, they're Georgia inside linebackers. They have great speed, and they can get sideline to sideline, and they can move, and they can make plays in space. And so they're going to try to take the quarterback run away, I think. I think the defensive front, Jalen Carter's as healthy as he's been all season, and it's not the defensive front from last year. You don't have Jordan Davis, who's, maybe the best run stopper in SEC history or something. But it's still very hard to run against Georgia. It's very difficult. And you just look at the stats, and they validate that. But more than that, what Georgia has been elite at this season is not necessarily limiting teams in the passing game, limiting teams in the run game. It's keeping teams out of the end zone. It's the scoring defense they've not even been great in terms of turnover. Turnover margin for Georgia hasn't been spectacular or what you would expect from a championship caliber team. But Georgia just keeps teams from scoring points. They force field goal attempts. They keep teams out of the end zone. And Georgia last year, I think, gave up 10.6 points per game, and this year gave up 10.7 points per game or 10.8 points per game. It's very similar to the defense last year. And so once LSU gets down in the red zone, will they be able to find receivers? Will they be able to run the football? And will Jaden Daniels be able to find space? I think that's the key to that matchup. Turn it around to the other side, and what happened to LSU's defense? I mean, I don't mean to be rude, but
no, it's a very fair
I thought
question.
they were good. Like they looked, and to be fair, Texas A&M threw the ball for 155 yards.
It was all the run game.
And then ran the ball for 10,000 yards against LSU on Saturday.
Not far off.
That's what. So if I'm Georgia, is it just as simple as, well, our offensive line's better than Texas A&M's offensive line? And, A-Chain is a great back, but we like our backs. And so should Georgia just lean on the run game to attack this LSU defense? Or where are the holes in LSU's defense from what you've seen?
And I don't think that's necessarily the case. This has been a pretty solid run defense all season long, with 2 outliers being Tennessee, which when you think of Tennessee's offense, you don't think, wow, really good run team. But Tennessee was able to run for over 200 yards against LSU, and then again, Texas A&M. And it's been interesting because going into every game against a really stout run game, Ole Miss and Quinshon Judkins, Auburn and Tank Bigsby, even Texas A&M and Devon A-Chain, Brian Kelly's number one point or his number one key to the game is we got to stop the run. We got to take their biggest playmaker away from them. And if they beat us by throwing the ball, then fine. But we're going to take their number one strength away from them. So they did that against Ole Miss. They were able to limit Quinshon Judkins to, less than 100 yards, maybe 50 or so yards. They were able to limit Tank Bigsby, but they weren't able to do that against Texas A&M. And I don't know why. I really don't know why. Harold Perkins was pretty much a non-factor against Texas A&M. I look at Jaquelin Roy on that defensive front seven, who was really solid against Texas A&M. He had 12 tackles, 1.5 for loss. So he had a fine day, but it was just him. It was really a one-man show. They had missed tackles, missed reads. Jimbo Fisher was throwing out different looks at LSU's defense, and they weren't able to pick up on that. An LSU defense that I feel like all season long always knew what the opposing offense was doing before they did it, especially Harold Perkins. I think he's the best at that. As even if he gets kind of juked out a little bit, he has the speed to be able to catch up with the runner and the size to be able to bring them down. You didn't see that against Texas A&M. Missed tackles, missed reads, and they looked confused. I don't know if that was an on-the-road issue. I don't know if that was a preparation issue. I don't know if that was a we're looking past Texas A&M and we're looking ahead to Georgia issue. We're all asking ourselves those questions. I don't think that that Texas A&M's game plan should be the recipe for success against LSU, because I think that was more so an outlier than it was the rule with competing against LSU. But, I mean, if you watch that game and you're Georgia's offensive coordinator, you're thinking, okay, we'll just go ahead and run the ball. And if you stop it, we'll adjust. But they weren't able to adjust against Texas A&M and Devon Achane.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Todd Monken is a fascinating offensive coordinator because you kind of could get anything from him. Mm-hmm. This year, if you look at really Georgia's offensive game plan, offensive philosophies in these last several weeks, they have really been leaning on the run. They've really been trying to establish the offensive line and lean on the run, and it's had varying levels of success. Sometimes it's been good, sometimes it hasn't been good, and it's led to some games that were closer than people thought they were going to be. The Kentucky game was closer than people thought, even though comfortable wins for Georgia, never really a risk of losing the game to a team like Mississippi State or Kentucky, maybe a little closer than people thought. But if you look at the offensive game plan, it was kind of a heavy run attack versus earlier in the year in what I would call the bigger games of Georgia's schedule, the Tennessee game, notably, when the rhetoric going into the game was, well, against Tennessee, the best offense in college football history, Georgia's going to have to run the ball and try to control the clock and try to stretch the game out and try to make Hendon Hooker sit on the sidelines and try to limit the number of possessions. And Todd Monken came out with Stetson just passing it everywhere. And so it's almost as if in bigger games, they've leaned more on Stetson Bennett and his experience and his ability to find open receivers. And Georgia has got playmakers, obviously, most notably at the tight end, but A.D. Mitchell should be back for this game, Georgia's best wide receiver. He's been out almost 2/3 of the season with an ankle injury, and should be back for this game, which would be a huge boost for the Georgia passing game. And so you just wonder what kind of Todd Monken and Georgia offense we're going to see. I think they could come out, try to establish the run against LSU and build on and try to attack what was successful for Texas A&M. But I think more likely, you're probably right. I think Todd Monken will maybe even go the other way. And while LSU is trying to fix holes in the run game, they might come out and try to exploit them with the passing game offensively. But
if I have Brock Bowers on my side, ball's going to him on every single play. Kid is a monster.
There's so many matchup nightmares on the Georgia sideline. I think the Georgia fans' biggest frustration offensively has been, why don't they touch the ball more? Darnell Washington, probably a bigger matchup problem even than Brock. Brock Bowers got incredible speed, obviously incredible hands, playmaking ability. But Darnell Washington's 6'7" and 275 pounds, and it just he cannot be guarded. And so why doesn't he get the ball more? That's been Georgia's fans' frustration. I suspect that in a big game like this, if you could pinpoint some tendencies from Todd Monken, Georgia likes to come out fast in these big games offensively, and so I think you're going to see him throw it early. I think you're going to see him take shots, and probably a lot of play action early when LSU defenders might be, leaning towards the line of scrimmage, trying to maybe expecting that Kenny McIntosh or is going to get the ball and try to establish the run. So it'll be that, to me, that matchup is I think LSU offensively and Georgia defensively are more known. We sort of know what they are.
Right.
LSU's defense after last week and Georgia's offense have been a bit more enigmatic this year. They've been a bit more up and down. And so I think that'll be the matchup to watch is, can LSU get it back together defensively and try to hold this Georgia offense down and keep this game close and low scoring. I think that's the blueprint for LSU to potentially upset Georgia in this game, is a low scoring affair. But, will Georgia's offense be able to figure things out and move the ball? I think that's kind of what to watch. So let's get into predictions, because I need to know, you're taking the points, but I need to know if you think LSU is actually going to win this game. So let's talk about that right after this. All right, Caroline, it's been fun talking, but now let's get serious. Now
let's get down to business.
Let's get down to the real matter at hand. Are you going to stake your reputation and your LSU fandom here in front of everybody, in front of God and everybody, and take your LSU Tigers to win the SEC championship game? What's your prediction for this game? Give me a winner, a maybe possible final score, and how you expect the game to go.
I could give you an answer with my head or with my heart. And with my heart, it's this LSU team has been so tough all year long. When you count them out, they prove you wrong. They'll get down early in a game and they'll come back. And they've got so many playmakers on this game. They want to avenge that Texas A&M loss. While my heart believes that, I will answer with my head, because this is an LSU team that has been inconsistent all season long. And that's what we expected from a team that had 39 scholarship players less than a year ago, with a completely new coaching staff, with a new quarterback, with so many young pieces and so many pieces that were brought in from the transfer portal. We expected a little bit of inconsistency, because we expected this team to need time to learn itself and to learn each other. And while I think that the Texas A&M game absolutely was an outlier, I think this Georgia team is just too good. I think I learned how good Georgia truly is when I watched the Tennessee game. And I watched that Tennessee team basically just crumble from this Georgia defense. So while I do think that this LSU team is going to be tough, and while I do think that this LSU team is going to want to come out and prove something and say, hey, look, that team in College Station, that's not us. We're competing for an SEC title because we're one of the best teams in the SEC. I know they're going to want to go in with that mindset. I just don't think that they're quite there yet to be able to go head-to-head with Georgia. I think that that's also funny, too, because my interpretation of this Georgia team is they make games way more interesting than they should, at least in the first half. This LSU team is the exact same. We're down 17-0 against Auburn, 17-3 against Ole Miss, and they were able to come back and win those games. This has been a comeback team all season long. So I think that this game is going to be interesting in the first half. I think Georgia pulls away in the second. I'm taking Georgia to win 35-21.
Yeah, that's I don't disagree with that, and I do think both those teams. I think that's why watching that game last week, I was interested in the LSU Texas A&M game. Obviously, I wasn't fully sweating it out the way that you were, but yes. I almost, it's like it. As that game progressed, I thought LSU could still come back and win this game. Like, I didn't feel like they were out of the game
the whole time. I really thought that, when A&M scored first, I was like, okay, that's what this team needs. Like the opposing team scores first, and then this team just wakes up. And then the scoop and the The failed 2-point conversion, that was so stupid when LSU tied the game 17-17, failed 2-point conversion, dumb call. Excuse me, 17-17. And then the scoop and score happened. And then LSU was able to come back. The failed 2-point conversion, those were just momentum killers. And once I saw the failed the scoop and score, I thought this game's over. Because this team has been able to turn things around with big defensive plays.
Yeah.
And Texas A&M played that same blueprint against LSU when they were able to get a massive turnover and a big defensive play.
That's the path to LSU, I think, keeping this game close and maybe having a chance to win is its turnovers, big defensive plays. I just don't see a path to this LSU offense scoring a lot of points against Georgia. So if you tell me there's a pick six, there's a strip sack, recovered on the 10-yard line. Like, if you tell me those types of things, then absolutely those are things that concern me.
It's going to have to happen if LSU is going to want to win this game.
Right. And Stetson Bennett has had moments of absolute greatness in his career, and he's had moments where his decision making, and he hasn't always been punished for it this year. And so you look at his, if a casual fan might look at the turnover numbers or might look at the, the plays where he was intercepted, and a lot of those plays were not his fault. It was a tip ball, or it was something, like the receiver, ran the wrong route or things like that.
Right.
But there have been plenty of plays that did not result in an interception that should have, where he made absolutely ridiculous decisions with the football. He can get that mentality. He has that like gunslinger gamer type mentality where he's going to go out and think he can make the throw when maybe he shouldn't. So if that happens, and obviously LSU's pass rush is elite and could be a factor in the game. That being said, like, I just don't see, even if Jaden Daniels is 100%, like I said, it's hard to run on Georgia. I think the quarterback run game is going to be the number one thing that gets taken away, and that leaves the defensive backs to cover this great group of wide receivers. But Georgia has some really strong defensive backs, and so I think they're able to match up there. So I've got the game a little bit more low scoring, but I've got it 31-13. And so, I have Georgia sort of barely covering. You have LSU sort of barely covering. But it should be fascinating. There's been a lot of great SEC championships between these two teams, and excited for another one.
Excited for it. It's fun. It seems like these two teams in the SEC championship see each other fairly frequently, at least in recent history. So I'm excited for it. I'm ready for it.
Be great. All right. Caroline Fenton, Locked On LSU. Go subscribe and download all of those episodes. Locked On Bulldogs. I know we'll both have more stuff coming out for the rest of the week, and so we will see you guys then.
Well, thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen. So for your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. It's the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts.